So for showing up this morning. It's good to see you all. It's too bad, of course, we can't see each other in person, but we know this is going to be like this for quite a while to come. Carolyn, can you maybe start us off with a prayer?
Okay, sure. This is a portion of the Canticle of the Sun by St. Francis. Most high, all-powerful, good Lord, yours are the praises, the glory, the honor, and all blessing. To you alone, Most High, do they belong, and no man is worthy to mention your name. Be praised, my Lord, through all your creatures, especially through my Lord, brother, Sun, who brings the day, and you give light through him, and he is beautiful and radiant in all his splendor. Of you, Most High, he bears the likeness. Praised be you, my Lord, through Sister Moon and the stars. In heaven you formed them clear and precious and beautiful. Praised be you, my Lord, through Brother Wind and through the air, cloudy and serene, and every kind of weather through which you give sustenance to your creatures. Praise be you, my Lord, through those who give pardon for your love and bear infirmity and tribulation. Blessed are those who endure in peace, for by you, Most High, they shall be crowned. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Carolyn.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the last of the 4 Simpler Living forums on growing beyond habit. And this is going to be Erika Morgan's forum. Most of you, I think, know Erika very well, but I just wanted to add something that maybe we don't all know. This is from her bio, that Erika was Deputy Commissioner of Energy for Massachusetts, also, I guess, Deputy Commissioner of Environmental Protection for Maine. And as in those roles, she assisted each state's transition to a deregulated electricity system. In 2000, she formed New England's first retail aggregation of 100% renewable electricity, Maine Interfaith Power and Light, the first of now 40 interfaith power and lights nationwide. Really impressive stuff. That's important work. And I'm a Rhode Islander, so I like to hear about New England. New England's good. And she's currently at work. She'll tell you a lot more about this, I believe, in her forum, but working with the diocese on a huge solar program. So without more ado, turn it over to Erika.
Great, thank you, Phil. That's a great introduction. I'm going to share my screen now and see how this works and adjust accordingly. So here we go. Screen 2. Share. And get to my slides. Is this working? Can people see it coming?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So Erika, we can. Excellent.
I just did it. There you go, Phil. Excellent. So, okay. Well, thank you all for this invitation. And Carolyn, I have to say, your choice of prayer this morning was totally inspired, at least for me personally. One of my most favorite musical compositions in the world is by the Paul Winter Consort doing Missa Gaia in St. John the Divine in New York City. And they use the Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon as one of the themes in there. And I just totally love it. Okay. So happy St. George's Day, everyone. I have to say, this is the first St. George's weekend in a long time that I have not been making dragon bread. And I have to tell you, I miss it terribly. But we're going to talk about something else that's also fun today. And as Phil said, I have some slides and a bunch of stuff to tell you. There will be places where I'm going to need to remind myself to slow down, because I can rattle through this a little too quickly. But to start, here we go. This is an overview. I am very pleased to be part of this series, and particularly to be in the role of cleanup hitter. After an excellent series of discussions, I've also wanted to keep my kind of content in a constrained amount so that we have enough time to continue the discussion. Most of you do know me, but what you may not know is that I've been trained in systems thinking. As my medievalist daughter always reminds me, that's my lens for looking at the world. So whether it's our community, our church, we all operate in multi-level series of systems. You know, from the smallest to the largest, up to our city, the state, and even the planetary systems around us. They're all interconnected. The challenge is we can influence these, and in many cases we do. From the planetary perspective, we're influencing a lot of them to the negative, but we can also influence them to the good. And we can stop doing the damage that we've been doing and begin the restorative work that's so universally and painfully needed. So there are going to be a couple of themes in this conversation. I'm going to be discussing net zero energy, but I'm also going to be talking about two other things. One is systems and one is habits. I'm going to use as the centerpiece for this the effort underway through the Episcopal Diocese of San Diego throughout this presentation known as EDSD on the solar work that we are doing, with an overview of the process and some of the results so far. And then we'll talk a little bit about the implications of this, both at the diocesan level and particularly at our own level. We can get into that more in the discussion as well. And of course, talk about the hard work of changing systems. What does it actually take to do that, before getting into your questions and discussion at the end. So, okay, then I want to start with a definition of what does net zero energy actually mean. A net zero energy building, sometimes it says net zero energy, sometimes it's zero net energy. You know, the acronym switches around and isn't that important really. But what it's referring to is a building that stands on its own 2 feet from an energy point of view. It's sufficiently energy efficient that all of the energy it needs comes from an on-site generation of some sort, probably solar on the roof. So in that sense, the building is standing on its own. Whatever requirements it has, it's meeting. And that's sort of a metaphor for what we need to get to. Closed circles, circular systems, everything standing on its own. This term, net zero energy, is actually in California state law. And the latest statewide building code here, known as Title 24, took effect January 1st, 2020, and it requires that all new residential construction achieve this net zero energy standard starting now, starting in 2020, which is really pretty amazing when you think about it. So all new residential developments that are under construction anywhere in the state right now have got to have each home being net zero energy. The same will be required of all new commercial construction starting in the year 2030. And there are also equivalent mandates underway for large renovations on both the residential and the commercial side. Okay, so that's the intro. Now we get into the content here. Just out of curiosity, I'm very interested, and I'm going to switch to my view so I can see hands here. How many of you actually saw this? And if you did, wave. Did you see this come through the April 3rd edition of the diocesan newsletter? No? Don't know. There, Phil saw it. Yay, somebody saw it. So I was happy with this headline because we had been working on this for a while, and also because it really was and is the first time a diocese as a whole has gotten together and said, we're going to do this for all of our churches. There was one other diocese in the running, and that was the Episcopal Diocese of San Joaquin. They started working on it last fall and had announced at that time that they intended to do something, but we're the first one to actually sign the contract and do it. And we have been working on it since February of 2019. 2019 was essentially a pilot year with a lot of homework, a lot of research into vendors and financing methods, and a few dead ends, but also some outreach to a smaller group of churches who are ready to go now. So that was our 2019 year. Okay, so this is an overview now of how this whole thing works. And true to our, I would say, denominational characteristics, and I should a segue here. When I founded Maine Interfaith Power and Light in the year 2000, it was my joy, actually, to trot around to lots of different denominations of different kinds, the Catholics and the UCCs, and you know the Quakers and the Congregationalists, and they all do things differently. And of course, the Episcopalians were one of the. We would not have gotten this off the ground if it hadn't been for the Episcopal Bishop of Maine, who basically was a biologist by training and said, I want my environment committee to do this. And that was the only top-down thing that ever happened. But in any event, in our case here in San Diego, this is very much a bottoms-up effort. No one is going to be telling any church what to be providing an inducement, a carrot, no sticks, and inviting in participation. And so far that's working pretty well. One of the things that any church that expresses interest gets to do is set up a local team to work directly with me on this solar project, because it does take some work, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. You know, the reason for the team is to share that work, first of all, and then to provide continuity over time. One of the first things that happen is there will be an energy efficiency audit that will also kind of thread through all the work that they do. And we've developed, identified some partners. Two really excellent partners came out of our first year's work. And the first of those is Fellowship Energy Finance. And I want to draw your attention to the picture in the upper right-hand corner, which is their first project. It's St. Stephen's Episcopal in Richmond, Virginia. That was the first project that they did with their funding partner, the Episcopal Church Building Fund. Together, these two entities developed this, this project and put on that roof the system that's in the lower picture. So that's what they have now. Basically, it's a 50 kilowatt system that provides a good deal of electricity for that sanctuary, that beautiful sanctuary that reminded me an awful lot of our beautiful cathedral as well. Fellowship won 2 national awards for this project and for the innovative way that they look at financing in the nonprofit sector, which is a notoriously difficult category of projects to finance for a variety of reasons. They, with the Episcopal Church Building Fund, did subsequent projects at individual churches, but this effort in San Diego is their first time to work at the diocesan level. So previously it was one church at a time. Now we're trying to do the whole batch. So the second piece here, the net zero piece, we've heard a lot in this series about the supports the national church is giving for the care of creation and some of the resources that are available there. I'm not going to repeat any of that, but only to say that I do make sure the little teams know all about all this stuff and are really prodded to think about their energy systems as a way to get into that broader discussion. So we do start with energy efficiency. And one of the other elements of the Episcopal Church Building Fund's involvement in this project is if there is a non-energy loan that comes to light, they're willing to take that on as well under the same terms. So energy efficiency always comes first. And in some of the churches that have started already, we have found in the course of doing this work that there are some other things that need to happen as well. So for example, you don't want to put a new solar system on a roof that has less than 20 years of life in it. And in some cases, there have been some roofs that really did need some replacement. So that has been possible as well. The second thing here, fellowship checked, and it turned out that 90% of the locations for our churches were eligible for a state grant to support the installation of battery storage system. So we offered all 46 churches the chance to apply, and 25 have done so. So thanks to Kathleen and the cathedral staff for getting us that electricity data, which was used to put into an application. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. So these two aspects are woven in kind of at the beginning, as it's turned out, before we even get to the on-site generation, which comes next. Okay, now I'm going to slow down here a little bit to explain how the financing works. First of all, there were a set of criteria that we were looking for in the financing providers. The first thing was no upfront money. Neither the church nor the diocese need to come up with a single dollar. Of course, I always joke at this point and say that my time is covered by the diocese to a certain extent, so that I am provided as a coach to all of the teams, no cost to them. So no upfront money, that is a starting point. The second thing was that the church needs to save money from day one. The diocese doesn't save anything because the churches are paying their electricity bills each independently, but they will save from day one or the project is not going to go forward. The third thing is we want the churches to gain ownership as soon as possible. We didn't want lease models. We didn't want rentals or power purchase agreements that go on for 25 years, because in all of those cases, there are investors behind the deal who are going to get a Wall Street rate of return for the entire duration of that contract. So these were contract forms that we walked away from. The fourth criteria was we did want to be able to use the investment tax credit, which, as many of you know, is available on solar. Corporations can take it, but nonprofits cannot. However, there are financing structures that enable that value to be brought to the table, and we are using one of those. So the structure that we settled on is shown in this graph, and it has two parts. But the first thing to know is that it is anchored in a master agreement that the diocese is signing. Financial stability matters in these deals, both on the credit side and then in terms of the actual financial profile of the entity, because the developer is putting a lot of money in as well, and they want to know that the partner is going to be there for a while. So this is one thing the diocese is doing for all the churches, is it is putting its credit and its financial statements on the line in this master agreement. The master agreement has been around the barn in terms of our approval structures here. 4 committees of the diocese have seen it and approved it, and the chancellor and vice chancellor have been through it and edited it and negotiated, and so that structure has been approved. So the master agreement is what anchors the whole deal. Then for each participating church, there is a separate exhibit that will be attached to that agreement, and that exhibit identifies the local specifics for the church. You know, what is the size of its project? What is it going to do battery storage? Is there additional loan that's going to happen? All of those are covered by exhibits. Also in that exhibit is the precise terms of the first 5-year deal for the church, and I'll come and describe that next. This financing package happens in 2 steps, and you can see in this graph the first 5 years and the period after the first 5 years. In the first 5 years, the church exhibit then it will describe a power purchase agreement with Fellowship Energy Finance. In that period, the churches are paying their electricity bill, but they're paying it at a lower level than they are paying now. And this is shown in the chart as the difference between the red line, the utility rates, which are assumed to go up at a relatively constant amount, although we know they actually go up in big steps. But in any event, the deal starts out with what the church pays to Fellowship in the green line, always below the red line. That represents the criteria I described, saving money off the bat, right from day one. So in that first 5 years, there is a per kilowatt rate that the church will be paying to Fellowship that will replace what it's been paying to the utilities. At the end of the 5 years, and the 5 years are the IRS compliance period for the investment tax credit. At that point, the church will get ownership of the system and can pay for it in a bunch of different ways, including any way they want on their own. But under this proposal, the flat green line represents a fixed cost loan available from the Episcopal Church Building Fund to buy out the system, to buy out the PPA. Again, the church pays nothing out of pocket to do this. The system at that point is used, so it's not at the same price it would have been at the beginning. And those rates are not going to go up for the remainder of the agreement, which is shown here as over 25 years. But I think we're starting for 15 years, between years 5 and 20. So this is a graphic that shows you the structure here and generally how it's going to work. And if people have questions about this, please put them in the chat, and we'll come back and talk about this a little bit more later as we need to. Okay, so where do things stand right now? Does anyone recognize this church? No. This is
St. Albans?
Oh, good guess. No, this is Christ Church Coronado.
Oh.
And look what they have on their roof. So what we discovered is that the diocese already has 6 churches with PV. Of course, these were maybe larger ones, coastal churches, who had the ability and went ahead and financed it on their own. So what's nice about what we're doing here is that we're able to do this with the smaller churches because we're batching things together. So the first batch are the churches that did their homework last year, and there are 4 of them ready to go. They're going to have their systems built by one installer will do all 4 of them. This is currently in the contracting stage. There are a few things that the lawyers are modifying about the master agreement and setting it up for these exhibits, so that is still happening. But those 4 churches are going to be the first out of the box, and that includes our own St. Luke's. And you know, my hat's off to Colin. He has been driving this project for literally years. It's always good to have an internal champion when you're thinking about big changes like this. The second batch is another group of somewhere between 4 and 8 that stepped forward last year but didn't get all of the purchasing homework done. So that's underway right now. July is kind of a deadline because we have to have enough time for the actual construction to happen before the end of the year. And the 2 biggest time sinks there are the permitting process, which can take 6 to 8 weeks, and then the interconnection process at the other end, which can take another 8 to 12 weeks. Thank you very much, SDG&E. And we don't know if these times are going to change in the COVID world. So everything we can get done by July will be able to be finished in 2020. Then starting in 2021, all the churches are going to be working on it this summer and fall, including getting their energy efficiency assessments done and any other precursor projects that they need to do. They can roll into batches in the beginning of 2021. So let's see. that's the current status there. So, and what's interesting is that because we did this battery storage project in the month of April, many more churches now have stepped up. They have gotten interested. And so now I have up to 20 churches that are interested and in some stage of this process, somewhere along the way. Also, the battery storage piece, as I mentioned, Fellowship found that by virtue of our address, 90% of the churches were eligible. Out of the call for data, we got 25 churches that stepped forward and said, yeah, we're interested in this, please apply for us. And we were able to submit 15 grant applications. The 10 that were not funded, turns out they were not economically viable, meaning that there wasn't enough either evening usage for switching to off-peak power, or for other reasons, the incentive level wasn't high enough. Those projects didn't pass the sniff test, and so were not put forward as applications. However, we did design systems for all 25 of those churches, and learned a great deal about what is possible in terms of the size of the storage units that they would use if they did want one, and the value of the size and the value of the solar systems that would be provided. So all told, we would be able to put 309 kilowatts of solar on the churches, worth over $800,000. That's a preliminary estimate from those participating in the grant thing. The last piece, that 3 of those got funded, and we have 12 more that are on the wait list. Now, I should hasten to say, this doesn't mean that these projects are going to get built. What it means is that they are economic to the church, and they got an incentive payment that they can take. The church still has the ability to say yay or nay, whether they want to do any of these projects or not. They can back out if they want to. And all told, we put in for over $120,000 of incentive financing. Now, we're not going to get all that, but those 12 that are on the wait list are still in the running. So all of this leads to the potential for each team on its own terms and at its own timing to be thinking about their energy picture in a new way and really to think outside the box. So then I'm going to go now to the implications of all this. So first, on the diocesan level, the first big implication is that this is a serious effort. The diocese is serious about it. They're putting some time and energy and emphasis on really making this possible for the churches in a way that is beneficial for them. The churches will be able to recoup the savings early on and then going forward for 25 years. So this is serious. Secondly is the churches are noticing. They're stepping forward, and that's really fun to see. But the other fun thing to see is that other dioceses are noticing. And I mentioned the Diocese of San Joaquin. They're right with us step by step here. But also through that article, we've gotten calls from other dioceses, including Ohio and Southern Ohio. Together, those dioceses have 130 churches. They're doing something similar themselves. And I just got another call from the Diocese of Arizona. They have 89 churches, and everyone is interested in how did you do this? So we're role modeling here, which is really, I think, a great opportunity for all of us. And then the other implications for us here at the cathedral, we have options also. We've talked a bit about, what will happen in our new campus. This gives us a way to think about what can happen on our old campus. What does it need? And while it's not easy to see how solar might make a contribution, it is certainly easy to see that we have some energy systems evaluation to do. We'll take advantage potentially of the energy audit and see what comes out of that. There's been some talk about what would a new heating and air conditioning system look like. This is an opportunity to think about that if we choose to do so. Lastly, the implication to go beyond just the energy side. So in all of these teams, when we have our introductory webinar, I kind of challenge them a little bit and say, this solar system that you're thinking about can last more than 20 years, sometimes 30 years. They're much more longer lived than the 20-year warranty would suggest. During that time, what is going to change in your community? What will the next 20 plus years look like in terms of your, not only your worship, but also your services to the community? And are there ways through this effort, through this discussion that we're starting now, to start role modeling other things like support for the vulnerable? We always talk about the vulnerable as meaning, yes, the unsheltered for sure, but in an era where power system shutoffs are more common, the vulnerable also include the medically fragile, the people who are dependent on electricity for breathing apparatus, for medical devices, for water. Many in our community, not in downtown San Diego, of course, but in other areas, are dependent on electricity to pump their water pumps. So if the power goes off, they're out of water too. What about refrigeration? What about food storage, food pantries, shelter from wildfires, but also just respite from the heat, cool rooms, and air conditioning? And all of these devices powered 24/7 through a battery storage system. These are the kinds of things that can be stretched into our thinking over time. So that's a challenge in the discussion. Okay, then I also wanted to now take a minute to talk about, and I don't know how I'm doing on time, but in any event, changing systems. It is hard work. There's no two ways about it, but it's doable. And you've all heard me expound before on this topic, so I couldn't resist an opportunity to tell you where things stand, because this is also a huge systems change that's happening now. So in thinking about all of this, we ask ourselves, all right, why bother changing the system? Well, there are a bunch of good reasons. Number one is to validate the new options and role model them. Second thing is to reinforce our own changing behavior. And thirdly, gradually replace the old options with the new options. So community choice electricity is the example I like to use. It was actually begun just 10 years ago when Marin Clean Energy became the first community choice entity. So now, 10 years later, where do we stand? There were 21 community choice agencies. And finally, they're coming to San Diego as well. San Diego Community Power was launched in the fall of last year. Clean Energy Alliance is an expansion from Solana Energy Alliance, which actually began, I think, even 2 years ago now. But it has expanded to include Del Mar and I believe Carlsbad. So statewide now, 170 cities, over 10 million customers in California, and that includes commercial customers and residential customers. And a whole lot of clean, new, renewable generation is coming online, 3,000 megawatt hours in projects, again, large and small, that have happened as a result of these agencies and what they are doing to build new clean electricity. It's coming into our world in a much more dramatic way than it would have without this major systems change. And by 2022, when San Diego was fully launched in all 5 of its cities, 38% of the state will now be on this option. And that's not even counting the ones that are still forming at the moment. So a beautiful summary of why we do this comes in a quote from the person who was the first chair of the board for Marin Clean Energy, someone who's no longer with us, but was a founder and an advocate in the early days of this movement. When he was asked why And what he said at their opening, he basically said, and this is a quote, "We'll just keep trying to do the right thing, as we always do, for as long as we can. I imagine that this point is the main theme of all our hard work, to do the best for the earth and all her children, all the time, with every action and decision we make. We may lose some efforts, but we are engaged in right livelihood, and that's what matters most. Hopefully, some greater purpose is holding all of us as we try to win a better future for our lovely world and her kids." So I will say in closing, growing beyond habit is Simpler Living's theme. It's another way of saying, break out of the old ways, embrace some new ways, try some new things. And clearly this is our challenge. As people who care for this, our island home, this is what we're here to do. We have to add the systems of the natural world to our prayer list, as well as our prayers for our human family. And we have to change the systems around us to break up the old habits and reinforce the new by making our buildings net zero energy whenever we can, and doing that with our homes as well, and we can. By trying new things, by picking up the low carbon options, and decarbonizing in all the things that we do. And there's been a lot of discussion about all of these things in this series. And we are, all of us, the pioneers and the settlers in this new territory, and our challenge is to never give up, stay engaged. So I never tire of explaining to people why to do this. And I explain to everyone who asks, and many people who don't. And also to exercise my voice and my vote on environmentally favorable policies. Indeed, it's only because many Californians have done this that we have these planet-saving policies like Title 24 and the Renewable Portfolio Standard that's changing electricity, and the incentives for on-site solar generation. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The policies are what can speed this change on a global, certainly a state level, and ultimately a national and global level. So, and the last thing is finding the hopeful examples wherever we can and sharing them. So I want to end by thanking all of you, all of the presenters in the series, and everyone who's participated in the discussions. I think the discussions have been really good. You are all role models and tenacious strivers working to make these changes stick. So with that, I am done. We'll stop sharing this and take any and all questions that I can answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
I just wanted to say I really appreciate the graphs. That they were very helpful, and I especially like your last statement. It wasn't up on the screen, but it was a powerful reminder, and to pray for natural systems as well as the people we hold in our hearts. So that's a great reminder. Thanks a lot.
So Erika, we're going to take questions, directly from you guys in a second, but there's a bunch in the chat already. So let me just read these off and you can answer. Does the pandemic put a kink in this project? And can you give us the names of the churches that are teed up in case a conversation may want to speak to each other?
Like other churches might want to talk to each other?
Sure, yeah. So the answer to the first question is about the pandemic. The industries involved here, energy efficiency and solar, in the state of California are both essential services. So they are open. The activities involved here of doing an energy audit or doing an installation project are all very low contact, meaning that it's for an energy audit, it might be one person entering a church where there is one additional person to show them where everything is. And then they look around and they evaluate what's going on. So this can be done with proper distancing and protection for all involved. On the solar side, those teams are generally 2 or 3. And this kind of mini construction activity is one of the things that a lot of states are starting out when they reopen. That's what they start out with. But in California, they didn't actually ever have to close down. So from those 2 points of view, there really hasn't been, there's been a slowdown because everything is slowing down. But the real challenge is on the permitting side, because permits come from the county. And county people are working at home, and who knows how that volume is going to compare to previous years when they were, you know, when they were at full complement. So those are the unknowns are on the permitting side, and then on the interconnection side of the utility. In both cases, people are still doing the work. We just don't really know whether they're going to be able to do it at the same pace. And the other 4 churches that are starting out, I will share their names. They are all in the process. I haven't seen their agreements yet. So that's the only hesitation I have, is that it's probably premature to talk to them because they don't know yet whether they're going forward. They have not actually executed the exhibit that goes along with their project. So if any church does want to talk to another church, I would like to be the intermediary there so that I can make appropriate introductions with regard to time. But the 4 are, of course, St. Luke's and the Episcopal Church Center itself. It's on Sunset Boulevard, and St. Thomas in Temecula, and All Saints Vista. They were ones that stepped forward early, and as it turns out, it's like it's going to get a battery grant. They have been awarded a battery grant. So that could be a very fun project. Okay, next question.
I had a question, Erica. You said when they get permits and stuff, so does that drive the cost of the property value or up or anything? Or, oh, because Title 24 right now, if you do it now, you don't get that property tax. You get the benefit of not having your property taxes go up, right?
I think solar basically is exempt from putting the property taxes up. I think that's been under state law for quite some time. Title 24 doesn't come in. I mean, Title 24 comes in these projects in the sense of anytime you renovate a property, you still have to mind the building codes. But for the solar side, it's the electrical code that they're following, and it probably doesn't directly affect the solar project per se. It definitely affects what the energy efficiency people are looking for, because they want to make sure that lighting and HVAC and all the other components that they're looking at, you know, are up to code. Now, it doesn't mean you have to replace everything. If you have a functioning, you know, I don't know, water system, hot water system in the property, you don't have to change it out. But you could be told over time that if you were to do so, you would save the following amount because the new technology is that much superior to what you've currently got.
So they wouldn't say, oh, we won't do it because you have an old system. They're still going to do yours. So, okay. That's all.
Yeah. So that's the, you're absolutely right. That's a good point. And it just brings out that the energy assessments are another way to contribute to the thought process. You know, these are the things that you could do. And if you did them, this is the likely savings you would see if you just simply replaced your old stuff with some new stuff. And the new stuff would cost about this, and the savings would then be that. So that's what we're expecting from the energy audit. We have had a slowdown on the energy side because the original audit team was a company based on the East Coast that Fellowship knew, but they were shut down and not traveling anymore. So we've been looking locally and giving some thought to how to do it in a somewhat different way. So that's another thing that's a little bit on a slow path, but that won't affect the churches that did their homework last year.
Cool, thank you.
So Erica, can you tell us a little more about the current status of battery technology? I mean, battery technology is actually a big challenge. solar
The
tech
biggest challenge.
is the biggest challenge. Solar technology has really improved a lot and is, well understood and doing really well. But my understanding, which may be out of date, is that battery technology is still a big challenge. So can you tell us what the...
I will tell you what I know, which is not a lot, and that is that the technologies of the battery systems that we're using today are all lithium-ion batteries. There are a number of battery technologies that are coming down the pike right behind, and the battery industry is investing heavily and growing very, very quickly. And that the pricing on the battery side has dropped amazingly over the last 5 years. I mean, it's like dropped 50% in 5 year time, with the result that there is a tremendous surge of battery deployments occurring. Now, there are a number of different manufacturers. I cannot, tell you the difference between the Tesla batteries and the LG Chem batteries and all these other kind of batteries. These are all lithium-ion batteries. They do have now significant track records, and they are being, they are going into systems in order to basically provide a degree of resilience in the electricity system. So the battery grant program that we just participated in was set up by the state to basically vastly increase the implementation of these batteries for the purposes of putting them in places where the utility system has need for resilience. So that's what enabled this grant program to expand. I mean, it's basically the state just put $550 million into putting batteries, specifically batteries, in areas of high fire threat districts and in low income and communities that are typically at risk of the power shutoffs. So again, I'm not a technical whiz on these things, but what I can tell you is that the investment community and the state policymakers have deemed that this is something we need a lot more of.
We got solar on our house last year, and I don't know if it's changed, but all the different companies told us the cost you would spend on a battery. Well, at that time, they were telling us that SDG&E pulls all your power out of your battery every night. So you can't store it over time. You just have it for the 24-hour period. So if you're at high risk, if you're in Pine Valley, like my friends, and you're going to have your power shut off 4 times a year, for a week because of fires, then it would be worthwhile. But for us, the amount we might save by not paying at peak time, the cost of the battery way superseded that. But I have other friends who got batteries on their systems and they seem happy about it. But that's what kind of looked like for us, at least residentially last year.
Well, good for you for looking at it. And you're not wrong about that, because for most residential customers, the big savings is the difference between shifting from the on-peak usage in the evening to the off-peak usage during the day. So, and it was true that a number of our churches did not, the battery applications didn't go forward because the systems didn't make enough sense. They didn't have enough evening usage to even do that off-peak shifting, and they weren't in the vulnerable locations that were getting the higher incentive levels. So that didn't work. I think you're right. Go ahead.
They were telling us also you could always add a battery later. So
you can always add a battery later
until the batteries get really cheap and better, and then add one to your system. When SDG&E lets you save it for a week or something, wait and catch up later. It was their advice.
Yeah, I think that's not wrong. I also think that this notion that you can't hold it overnight, that is the first time I've heard that. What I have heard, though, is at the policy level, there is an effort right now to tell them that the utilities cannot not only not drain it, but can allow a battery whenever there is a pending power shutoff to store up. So that you can basically top off your battery and be sure that you have full storage in the event of a shutoff. So that's a policy change that's coming down the pike. Okay, other question?
I just had one more question.
Yeah.
And you talked about the peak, and then I think you kind of answered about why some of the churches, I wanted to know what peak times were they looking at grabbing the data? Is that between where you said they didn't have a high usage? Is that from 4 to 9?
Yeah.
And
That's
then
from 4 to 9, and that's the way it's set up now in SDG&E territory. They've moved the peak hours to the evening when many people in the residential are home cooking dinner and whatever. So that's why they're encouraging people to, you know, do their laundry in the morning or whatever. For church activities, many of the churches don't have a lot of evening activity, so there wasn't a great deal of savings. In fact, we have, you know, Christ Church Coronado that I use the example of. They have solar right now, but chose not to go after a battery because they have already shifted all of their use before 4 o'clock. So there'd be zero benefit for them to do that. Plus, they are in no worry of ever losing power, being located where they are on Coronado near the base. So they're very secure, and they didn't see the need for a battery, and that's totally their choice. Totally their choice.
Right, right. And
okay.
And so I have one last question is you had mentioned that some churches wouldn't want, they have, at the end of the day, like you just said earlier, they're the ones who decide if they want to move forward or not, right? So it's not dictated that they should, but wouldn't they want to if they're saving money, right?
That's the carrot. That's what we're hoping. That we're just dangling it out there, that this is a really good way to save some money and look as it gets better over time. Don't you want to do this? And you can do it right now with no upfront cost. So, you know, this offer is not one of these, oh, you have to tell us in the next 2 weeks or it's going away kind of thing. So they'll have some time to think about it. And it's also part of the plan that some of the early adopters, like St. Luke's, will go forward and be able to talk to other churches about what they've done.
What is their fear of not moving forward, though?
I haven't heard anyone yet describe that. Other people with thoughts or questions? I see we've got 8 things in the chat box, Phil. Have you gone through those?
I haven't looked at them for a bit, so.
I think they were mine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, I do have a question, actually. So how does Fellowship Energy make money? This sounds like such a good benefit for the churches. They've got to get something out of it.
They get something out of it. They are bringing the investors to the table, and they are, and I don't think I said this clearly enough, they own the system for the first 5 years. They contract with the installers. So we don't necessarily know what the installation price is. We don't know what their cost of money is. They're making a little bit on these projects. They're not making as much as some of these other big companies are, because they are willing to do smaller projects, which are harder. And you can't get the same margins on each little kilowatt hour on a small project that you could with a big one. But I think that they are pretty creative in the way they structure these deals. I don't know what's going on inside their financing world, but I think that they are taking care of themselves. I don't think they're making a Wall Street rate of return. I think they're making a more, let's just say they have a sharper pencil than a lot of the other financing entities do. But I also think that they are really looking to expand in this world. They really do want to focus not just on Episcopalians, but on all the other all the other denominations out there as well. There are the Episcopal Church Building Fund, as I mentioned, is called a Church Extension Fund. There are 3 other large church extension funds, including one run by the Lutherans that's got like $20 billion of investment ability. So these funds help each other. And I think it's Fellowship's strategy and game plan to move into the church community, because this is an underserved area.
Erika, am I on? Yeah.
You're on.
Yeah. Thank you. That was really clear presentation. And I hadn't looked at that diocesan thing in April 3rd, so I'm glad to learn about it. Also, I cannot take credit for the inspiration of the prayer. That was Phil's, so I want to give Phil credit for that. But I can definitely identify with your appreciation of Missa Gaia. Oh my gosh, that just blew my mind when they first came out with that.
They're fantastic. Yeah. Yep.
So thank you. This is inspiring.
So I think maybe, unless that's one more burning question, we should just wrap it up. Is there anybody else with a real burning question to?
I'm wondering, this is Joan, I'm wondering if St. Paul's were to pursue this, what would our next step be? An energy audit?
That would be our next step, absolutely. Yeah. As it turns out, the battery application that we put forward did not pencil out. So we were not one of the ones that were able to go forward. And partly that's the challenge because we don't really have a good solar setup there. And SCHIP was looking for combined battery plus solar projects. So the churches that already had solar, for example, they didn't go forward either. But yes, the energy audit would be our next step, and it'll definitely give us something to think about.
To follow up, since there's consideration being given, I believe, to adding, to putting in an updated heating and cooling system for the old campus and the to include the sanctuary, which would, I think, be a hard space to heat and cool efficiently. Would the energy audit look at that so we'd really be seeing what the future benefits would be?
It's my hope and expectation that they would, but as I mentioned a moment ago, we don't actually have a selected provider yet, so the form of their reports is still a little unknown. We know what we're telling them, and that is that the standards that we want to have followed by the energy auditors are the standards that have been put forward by the Interfaith Power and Light movement. They have a set of things that they expect to be covered. And so that will be common in all of fellowship's work.
Thank you. This was an excellent presentation, Erika. And both Bob and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so I think we should just wrap this up. So Erika, I agree. This was very, very informative. I learned a lot. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
appreciate it.
Yeah, you were great. And this is the last then of the Simple Living Growing Beyond Habit forums. Jeff or Penny, do you want to mention what the forum is next week? Or do we have?
So next week is Memorial Day and there is no forum. The following week is a little bit up in the air right now, but we're leaning towards a forum of some kind about St. George's Day. So stay tuned to your e-news for that. And I'll go ahead and make a plug that in June, we have, I think, a forum on National Cathedral Day in the first week in June. But coming after that, the Dean will lead with Rob Ewell. We'll begin a series on racism and launch a cathedral-wide initiative on the Episcopal Church's Sacred Ground curriculum, which is part of the Episcopal Church's triennial, this 3-year effort focus on racial reconciliation. So stay tuned to your e-news for more information. It's a very exciting curriculum where we'll work on small groups to talk about the history of race in the United States and talk together about how that's impacted the development of the United States and its impact on our current environment. So Dean Penny will launch a book study of the book Waking Up White with Rob Ewell beginning the second week of June. So stay tuned for that.
Excellent.
That's great. And Simple Living will be hopefully following up with stuff on the carbon tracker. So kind of keep an eye out for that, because we hope to get all people that are, have done the carbon tracker thing and then are moving forward with saving, reducing their carbon footprint in some way to kind of create some forum, or what, it wouldn't be a forum, but I mean some group or something where we can kind of support each other, exchange ideas. And I think change happens better in community than just individually. So anyway, look for that. So great to see you all, and everybody stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Erika.